Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this special museum study. Today, we are going to study a rail museum, but not just any rail museum, the Russian Rail Museum in St. Petersburg. Opened in 2017, it is one of the newest museums in the world, and indeed, it hosts fabulous collection of railway stocks and railway booties. Today, we are going to have a look at some of the locomotives that we can see here. But before we begin, we must understand one thing. Russia has a very rich history, especially in the last 200 years. Following the Bolshevik Revolution, the Russian Empire collapsed and the Soviet Union was established. This continued till 1991, and Soviet Union was a huge country consisting of 15 modern day countries. After its breakup, they all became independent. But not just that, Soviet Union also had a great number of satellite states. So today, we are going to see a lot of locomotives that originate from the Russian Empire or from Russia or from these satellite states or those states who are now independent. So, in my opinion, the Russian Railway Museum is an excellent place to understand Soviet history on rails. Let us look at a few locomotives from this museum. Let us start with steam engines. In this brilliant picture, there are 3 locomotives that we can see. These are all steam locomotives, and most were built in the Soviet Union. Although this one, the freight steam locomotive OV6640, is one of the oldest locomotives in Soviet Russia. This locomotive was built in the 1910s, and the locomotive is a very useful one. This freight locomotive has many brothers, and they all worked in Russia. Some fought in the First World War, some even fought in the Second World War. The 080 locomotives are indeed a treasure of Russia. Then we have this L2298 freight locomotive. These kind of locomotives are also very powerful freight locomotives. A point worth mentioning is that most of these locomotives have a red star on their smoke boxes. I think that is because of the Soviet influence. Then we have the LV18/002 locomotive. These kind of locomotives are very modern, 1890s built freight locomotives of Russia. This is a very interesting locomotive, a fireless locomotive, built by the Schwarzkopf in Germany. As we know, the German Democratic Republic or East Germany was a satellite state for the Soviet Union, and this locomotive was built there. It worked at the Tops oil refinery. The locomotive has 10 driving wheels and indeed very strong, but it is also a fireless locomotive. That is, it has no firebox and no fire to keep it running. So these kind of locomotives are very interesting. This is a TE6769 locomotive. The locomotive is a strong mixed traffic engine of Russia. This is the Russian 262 SU 253-15. Based on the successful S-Class, the SU was bigger, stronger and faster, and 2,700 of them were built over 30 years. The first one was built in 1924, the last ones were built in 1954. Now let us look at some diesel and electric locomotives, such as this one, the CHS4 class AC electric locomotive. This AC current locomotive was built in 1972. 232 of them were built between 1963 and 1972. in Skoda's VI Lenin plant, later known as Skoda Works, in Plzeň, Czech Republic. That was known back in the days as Czechoslovakia. Czechoslovakia was also a satellite state for the Soviet Union, so we see a locomotive from that era. This is the last steam engine built by the Kolomna Locomotive Works, the P-36 class. The 484 locomotives are very powerful locomotives indeed. The Soviet Ministry of Railways, or the MPS, TP-60 Express Passenger Diesel Locomotive is indeed a fast locomotive. It has 3000 horsepower and can reach up to 100 miles per hour. The first of these were built in 1960 and the last in 1987. This is the CHS 200. In 1974, this locomotive was built and it was built in Czechoslovakia at Skoda factory. It can go up to 210 kilometers per hour. This is an electric locomotive VL22M-1729 and this is a DC current locomotive, the CHS2 class locomotive built between 1958 and 1973 in Plzeň, Czechoslovakia. So as we can see from these pictures, the Russian Railway Museum hosts several locomotives from all over the Soviet Union and Soviet satellite states. These locomotives were built in Czechoslovakia, in Tashkent and many other places. Most of them are independent countries nowadays. So indeed, if you want to study Soviet Russia's history through rail, I think this is the best place you can start with.